Excellent. Okay, so welcome to week 2 on our Awakening Your Innate Manifestation Ability. And I've already been getting some interesting messages and from different people and already experiencing some great manifestations. So James isn't here today, James McGow, but James was just telling us how he has not been able to get work for a while and basically managed to manifest himself a pretty high-paying new position. So it's always good when it starts happening in the beginning. In fact, last time we did the course, we had 2 people manifest jobs who hadn't had work for months. So exciting, and we haven't even got started on what I call the really serious principles and how this all works. So before we start, anyone has any experiences or things to share from last week, or had any shifts happen this week before we start? Usually it's too early, and I would assume no, but yet invariably we seem to get it happen. Just type in the text chat. Okay, so no, well, the main thing is not just yet, Robin. Yep, well, we've had a couple of people, like I'm saying, so and it happens to different people at different paces. Today we'll be starting to look into exactly the principles behind it and how it works, so you can immediately start manifesting some goals and some intentions and starting to see some pretty quick results. So one of the beauties when it comes to manifestation is like we've got here with Alice in Wonderland, one of my favorite movies, where the Mad Hatter. Have I gone mad? I'm afraid so. You're entirely bonkers, but I'll tell you a secret. All the best people are. And the truth is, as you start to get into manifestation, people often will think you're bonkers when they say you can change your reality and you can get things done. But that's the truth. No one really likes a boring person. And it's always good to have fun and do things differently. And the truth is, if you think the way everybody else thinks, you'll keep getting the results everyone else does. So what to do now is get rid of your distractions, turn your mobiles and social media on silent and give it full focus. And now in terms of recordings, just one update. One thing is that we've had happening is, of course, we're in the process of some fairly major changes in our own company and actually reorganizing everything. So in terms of having recordings, who here does not have an access to the membership site? Just give me a yes if you don't have access. Okay, so Jason doesn't have one yet. Robert, Steve, Rochelle. Okay, yep. So what you can do is message us, email us separately. We're going to give you a temporary link to access the course and the recordings until this is sorted out. We are uploading them now actually within 24 hours now. We've sped up our time. That's the good news. But we're just reorganizing our whole membership site right now. So if you aren't able to access recordings, email us at the help email and we'll basically get back to you with a link. Okay, so last week we looked at the introduction. So today what we're going to start doing is look a little bit more deeply at how the laws of manifestation apply. And we'll look at 3 levels. We'll be looking at the laws of manifestation and how they apply within just some common matters we face, like around tax, around investment, speeding fines, and we'll be looking also at introduction towards brain stage and manifestation. I was going to cover the science today, but I just decided that I would cover a little bit, I'll refresh on that one, but I'm going to cover that more in depth next week and cover that a little bit also in week 4. So I felt to bring the higher brain state stuff forward compared to what normally happens, because this is probably the most critical part of manifestation, is understanding brain science and how consciousness actually works. So, and then the rest of this is weeks 5, 6, and 7 is where we'll be actually going into advanced energy reading, manifestation, using things like pendulums. And I will add on this one, but the pendulums and the bobber and the left hand, that's something you'll find quite exciting once you learn to do this. I use this in terms of going into a shop and reading the energy of food, reading the energy of medicines and everything as to what's right for me at the time. So pendulums, using your left hand, all stuff which works very, very effectively once you learn how to tune in and make it an instrument connecting to your higher self. And then week 8 and 9 will be covering about energetic tax minimization and protecting your wealth and growing your income and learning how to manifest it. And move into a state of consciousness and thinking, but will attract it more to you and deal with stuff. And then, of course, our bonus week. So getting back to the fact that ultimately manifestation is about changing the energy. And last week I shared with you that basically your life right now is a product of your last 1,000 actions or choices and your last 1,000 thoughts. So I'll say that again. Your life is a product of your last 1,000 thoughts and your last 1,000 actions or choices. So if all of you looked right now as to where you're at, whether it's a financial issue, a health issue, a relationship issue, whatever it is going on in your life, you can pretty much look back at your thoughts and track them back over the last 2 or 3 days, and that will give you your answer as to why things are happening. Who, for example, right now has got an issue going on in your life which is really vexing you and which you're here to fix or shift, and you straight away know what I mean? Yep, Jason, yep. Everyone's owning up to this one, which is good. So understanding that taking command of your thinking is absolutely critical. And this is one of the most life-changing things that ever happened to me. And I shared with many of you that I'll share this again, what happened to me over 2 years ago when I had chronic joint pain building up in my body. And it was really painful. I was waking up every night at around 2 or 3 in the morning in quite sore pain, and I was panicking and thinking, oh gosh, because all the signs showed symptoms of basically arthritis. Now, of course, I know about manifestation and you don't label things, but I did. And I remember sitting with my manifestation mentor and telling him, I think I've got this issue developing in my joints. It's causing me a lot of pain. And he looked at me and he said, well, if you talk like that, you certainly will have. And I just go, oh. And he smiled at me and I knew straight away what he was saying. And I said, I know what you're saying. And he nodded his head. He said, if you keep talking like that, you will have one. And one thing I did the whole time, but I will say, is I made that slip up. But never once did I allow myself to label it, because the moment you label something, you create it into a form. So, for example, if you say, I have arthritis, then you have it. It's that simple. So I knew that if I said I have arthritis, then that's like a judgment, jury, executioner. I have it. So one of the things I started to do was change the way I was talking about things. And I never once told a single person what was really going on, apart from seeing the health people. People would say, how's your body? I'd say, it's great. I'm getting better and better as each day goes by. In the morning, when I was waking up at 2 in the morning and feeling that pain, I noticed that what was happening was my thought processes. I'd wake up, and because I was in a deep sort of brain state, because when you first wake up, you're in a lower what's called hypnotic brain state, which means you're more susceptible to programming. And the first thought that would come in was, oh my gosh, it's getting worse. So what I did was I did something that Raymond Grace taught me. And I imagined getting a paintbrush and throwing a big red blob on the thought as soon as I woke up in the morning. And then I would just say out loud as I was waking up, it's great that my body is already getting better. And I'm taking action now to see it keep improving. And so I started to do that. On top of that, I also did some of the clearings and doing a manifestation. And I did a manifestation ritual where I created it, but I was in perfect health and my joints felt amazing, and then did clearing on myself. Very interestingly, as soon as I did that, my desire to do yoga shot through the roof. And I went from just doing it sporadically, I just got this sense that I needed to do a lot more yoga. And I had the instant sense of going on a fast. I confirmed that with a naturopath I knew, went on an 18-day juice fast. And I went on an intensive yoga program for 3 months where literally I just went nuts. Just doing yoga, just stretching myself out and lots of breathing. Within 3 months, I was 70% better. Within 6 months, my joints felt pretty much normal. So the point is, once you start to take control of your thinking and realize that you're creating your reality every day, and that everything that's happening in your life is just the movie of your life created from the inner movie projector coming from your brain. And it's not just me saying this, as you saw last week. Prominent physicists have recognized that now. Einstein, who started off as a material physicist who believed that matter superseded consciousness, towards the end of his life was starting to acknowledge that perhaps there was a much greater force of consciousness that governed matter. He was constantly contradicted by Niels Bohr and David Bohm, prominent physicists. New Harvard physicists and Oxford physicists like Amit Goswami are now acknowledging that the quantum realm is real and takes priority, and in many ways consciousness thinking takes priority over the physical realm. David Wilcock, in his book Source Field Investigations, has discovered in numerous experiments with plants and with energy sensors that simply by putting a pyramid and by projecting love towards the plants that were getting that happen grew much faster than the ones that weren't. By contrast, plants that had projected thoughts of fire and being burnt literally showed a vibration going off the chart. In Russia, and I'll be showing about this in one of the later webinars, but in Russia, they did numerous experiments and they found everything from using pyramids and using manifestation to actually had a significant decrease statistically in hurricanes and weather dramas that were happening in a particular area. So once you learn you can transform the energy, it's incredible what you can do. Raymond Grace shares about how in Virginia that the government now has secretly been using him at times to go in there to polluted water and energize the water because they tested it straight afterwards and they found a significant improvement in the quality of the water. And many of you, of course, would know Dr. Emoto's work, who basically discovered that the words and projected things that you say over water, when examined under a microscope, made a significant difference to the composition of the water. So when you realize this, you realize that your life is really a biochemical composition or outcome materially of what you've been thinking and what you've been projecting out there. So ultimately, you start to realize this, and this is our revision from last week, our 5 scientific principles that we proved last week, in which I will be showing you further proof next week. Number 1, quantum realm is real. And pretty much more and more scientists are now acknowledging that classic physics is now questionable, but there is truly an etheric or mystical quantum realm. But the yogis and mystics got it correct when they said that matter is preceded by consciousness or your way of thinking, not the other way around. And contrary to what Einstein first used to say. The second thing that they found is that all things are actually interconnected. Now, there's various experiments we'll be showing you next week that have been done that show extraordinary behavior of atoms that shows that atoms which really shouldn't be doing certain things are synchronizing with other atoms and how they spread throughout the parts. So we showed, for example, that things like the brain, that when somebody or someone loses an arm, the other arm takes on more functions. Paul Peach's experiment, when they were pulling out fish's brains and repositioning them, were finding that nothing actually changed in the fish because the whole brain kind of holograph just realigned itself. The third one is, of course, space and time doesn't actually exist. In other words, that really, it's only in this 3D realm where we think linear, but it does. The fact that I can be doing a webinar with you, and many of you can be in a whole other parts of the world, and in other parts of Australia, and in parts of America, and you can be getting healed and experiencing results, shows you that certainly space or distance doesn't matter. And as you now know, time doesn't exist either, and that literally in an instant you can be past or future. So once you realize that, you can shift anything right now. Fourthly, that holographic theory is real, i.e. things don't exist until observed. This is one of the most profound findings in physics, where Schrodinger's cat was one example. In the holographic universe with Michael Talbot, he, of course, shows numerous experiments and confirmations, even in medical journals, which basically showed that things don't actually exist until you observe them, in a sense that unless you look at your computer, for example, that the moment before you look at your computer, it isn't actually a particle, it's a wave. In other words, it actually doesn't exist, which is how the yogis and mystics have been able to do things in India, proven verifiable miracles, like being able to, for example, manifest like Sri Baba, who's able to actually manifest rocks or gold or silver in his hand materially, and has been done it in front of numerous people in numerous tests. And to give you an example about how powerful this is, I remember 4 years ago at Raymond Grace's seminar meeting a guy called Jeff Jones, and Natasha probably knows about Jeff Jones, but Jeff is actually what's called a breatharian, if you've heard of them, where Jeff basically had a lot of allergies, and one day decided, you know what, why can't I create the reality of every time I drink water, I get all the food I need? And 20 years later, he hadn't eaten food and was living on water, and there's numerous people. Theresa Neumann in India, the media came and actually observed her and tested her, looked into everything, and found for 50 years she hadn't eaten food. So understanding there's a lot of things that but literally the only thing limiting us in what we can accomplish and what we can see happen in our life is just our belief system, and the fact that most of us have a completely, what I call manufactured belief system that's been programmed into us by media. I always watch in amazement on Facebook when I see people spouting off stuff, which has just pretty much come from the media, from their churches, from their school system, from their parents, and then wondering why their life doesn't really shift. And one of the things that has helped me in life is I've tended to have a belief that I assume that when people are telling me stuff, it's not actually true until proven otherwise. I'm naturally a little bit like that. I naturally like to rock the boat and go against the norm. So one of the things for me was when, for example, and the other thing is I don't accept failure very easily. And I can remember 20 years ago when I was chronically ill, like chronically ill, I just decided that I wasn't going to accept that. And I accepted that healing and health and being well was basically part of my future. And I assumed that was the case, and that anything to the contrary was incorrect. To the point where I remember a doctor actually telling me one day, he said, "This is incurable, you're stuck with this." And I just said to him straight out, "Well, it's not incurable, it's just that you clearly don't know how to fix me." So last week we gave you some homework. Who actually did this? Anyone follow through what we gave you about thinking about some of these things? Christine, yes? Great. So have anyone really thought about your belief system and your realities and noticing what you really do believe? Max, excellent. One of the first parts, Nolene, that's great. Jason, Rochelle, the first part about changing things is to realize this particular stuff. And I always like to give the example here of speeding fines and speed cameras. Now, for example, it's pretty common over here in Australia that you kind of assume speed cameras are a given and we're stuck with them. I can tell you right now that in Lebanon, for example, that as soon as they tried to bring in speed cameras, the citizens immediately destroyed the speed cameras, or else they stole them and then hid them from the government. In the end, they gave up on it. South Islands and New Zealand, similar experience. US and certain parts of US, they had the same thing. Japan, people just rode over the speed cameras and destroyed them. Certain parts of Britain. So the point is that very much not just your own mindset, but the collective consciousness really does program us and influence us and affect the way we think about things. And yeah, Christine, that was an eye-opener looking at the Australian collective consciousness. Yeah, look, absolutely. Unfortunately, it does affect us, especially your upbringing has a major impact upon you because your parents and their belief system, you're exposed to that from when you're young. And especially as you'll learn shortly about brain science, from ages 0 to 12, your brain is pretty much vulnerable to anything that your parents believe or speak over your life, simply because you're in what's called a more Zen brain frequency, like you're in what's called an alpha or a theta brain frequency or delta. It's not really until you're 13 that you start the process of developing your own brain and thinking more for yourself. So I've mentioned even here, like, what are your realities for what you really believe on things? Do your kids really need to go to school or university, for example? And like I was mentioning, I still remember what Sri Yukteswar, the great yogi, when he was 10, he overheard his parents talking one day, and his mum saying to his dad, "The thing is, once you get a job and you work for someone else, whether you like it or not, you're effectively their servant." And Sri Yukteswar was horrified, and he decided at 10, "I'll never work for anyone." And when he was 20, he basically had no money, had his father on his case to basically get a job or get some money, held his ground, and then just basically created the intention that he was going to connect with Source, connect with the masters, and basically started just giving thanks and saying, "I know that I'll be able to provide for myself abundantly." Next minute, ideas came to him. Before he knew it, he owned some real estate. By the time he was 22, he'd done so well, he didn't need to work anymore. And then he spent the rest of his life serving humanity as a spiritual healer and teacher. And this is something, Christine says it's a great story we can follow. Yeah, well, you can see my kids. Like William has had, my oldest son's had numerous pressure from his mum and from others, well-meaning, to go and get a job. I was the contrarian voice and told him, the moment you get a job, William, just understand that it's a cycle you'll find it hard to get off because you get used to the paycheck. So I said, if you're going to go that path, make sure you really know what you're doing. And I said, understand that. And he made a decision not to. And then he ended up going and teaching himself on YouTube how to do card tricks. And he just decided one day he'd teach himself. And then he decided one day to go up to a table at a cafe and do a card trick on them and then ask them for a donation. before he knew it, he's running a busking business. And in Fremantle, he's going on the streets and doing busking. And I remember one day he made $200 in 3 hours. And just simply by busking and asking. And now, of course, he's been doing healings and been doing teaching works for people as a 17-year-old. And as many of you know, have experienced healings of him yourself as a 17-year-old now. And basically making more money than he'd ever get in a job right now. And works his ass off for it, mind you, but he loves it, absolutely loves it. And at 10 o'clock at night, it's a joke in the family now. Like as Sammy knows, we go past the room and we hear him still talking to someone. And we're like, who are you talking to? Oh, such and such needed some help and needed some clearing. So, and then of course, Edward, he's 15. He told me at 8 that he was never going to work for anyone. I said, really? He said, nah. He said, I'll be a billionaire. And he said, and I'll own lots of property and I'll have my own company. By the time he was 12, he had his own business. He had his own YouTube channel with 500 subscribers and doing graphic design for people. Now at 15, he runs the whole Awakening Within group of 5,500 members, runs the whole thing, runs the webinar campaigns, oversees staff at 15. So if anyone tells you that basically you can't accomplish what you desire, the point is you can. You just have to realize that what people tell you is possible is generally just their own projections on you, and just basically just don't take it seriously and just follow what your own dreams are. And think about what you're telling, and think about not only what you're telling yourself, but what's been told to you. Think about, what are you telling your children? What are you telling your friends around you? What are you telling people? What are people around you telling you? You know, what have your parents told you about money and government, about authority? What do you believe about government? You know, how do you react when you get a government notice? Do you panic? Do you get scared? Or do subconsciously, do you do something about it? I can remember when I used to get government notices, I was terrified when it first used to happen to me. After a while, I suddenly realized one day this is all an illusion anyway. And I can remember getting a notice, they were tax auditing me for 5 years, going back 5 years. I can honestly tell you I wasn't stressed. I just looked at it and go, oh yeah. And I even said to my accountant at the time, I said it was always going to happen. I do this kind of work. And I said, this is cool. It gives me a chance to prove that what I'm doing works. So I did a projection that said that the audit would go smooth and it would be a great thing for my business. I got on quite well with the auditor, ended up actually getting on so well with him, but by the end of the audit, even though he found mistakes everywhere, he goes, doesn't matter. And he basically let it all go. And then I was telling him, and we were talking about life after the tax office and talking like friends. So the point is that you can literally create that. So just share. So in doing this homework, just share in the text chat what you got. Just any realizations that you had about yourself. So just share in the text chat what you've got or what you picked up. Jason, terrified when government notices come. Yep. I was told growing up you got to work hard. It's clearing that default with Maxim. Yep. That we soak up. Yep. That default programming. Exactly right. We all have it, by the way. I realized for me that I grew up in a household where my father absolutely programmed into me. When I told him at 15 that I was going to do a business, they did everything to tell me it was too risky and investing was risky. So I was living in a constant conflict until I cleared myself around this area. Failed in my first 2 businesses because of the conflict. Jason, advice when growing, get a job with a big company for life. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was told too, by the way. Nolene, I'm stuck in the belief cycle. My parents had uni job, now we know better. Yeah. Well, I was always led towards security for Mitch, but now realizing that, yep. I mean, what is secure really? Is it secure having a job, or is it secure knowing that no matter what happens in the economy, you can take care of yourself? That's what I say to people. What is the greatest security? Really? Christine, I've totally changed my position on most of these and would raise my children totally differently if I had my time again. Yeah, look, absolutely. I think many people, knowing what they know now, would do things differently when it comes to that. Yeah, I certainly would. Yeah, in terms of some of the things I said to my kids in early on. So Christine Norby, sometimes I do not invest in real estate because the financial advisors thought I couldn't do it. Yeah. Yep. Good corporate job with benefits for life. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, really, isn't it? I remember reading about Larry Ellison. I don't know if any of you've heard of him, but the CEO of Dell. And he was actually asked to actually go and give a speech at Stanford, Yale University to the final year students. And he ended up being kicked off the stage because what he did was he started off saying, I've come here to tell you that you're the bright hope of the future and that you guys are here to change the world. He said, I've actually come to tell you that you pretty much lost hope and many of you are going to end up in life as losers. And then he said, now, I'm sorry to tell you all that and be the bearer of bad news, but most of you are going to work for bums like me who failed in school, who went and started a business, and you're going to be my employees. He said, because we need smart people like you. He said, the only ones here in this place that have hope are the ones of you who are dropouts and thinking about leaving. If so, leave this university quick, smart, go and start a business, fail, and then hopefully, he said, once you failed a couple of times, you'll learn some life lessons. But he said, see life as a game of Monopoly where failures are normal. And then he was kicked off the stage before he could continue. But I remember reading his speech and I laughed. I thought it was really funny because I've often told people said, you're so fortunate having had an education as a lawyer and accountant. I said, not really. I said, it's probably the greatest hindrance. I said, if I didn't actually have that, I probably would have lived my dreams a whole lot sooner. I said, doing that kind of stuff, if anything's been a hindrance. So, yeah, my partner right now, Sammy, of course, she's lived her life a lot simpler and doesn't have any of those hindrances. So that's why she's so great to be around. So, yeah, Steve puts work hard at school, get an education. Yep. Christine Norby, thankful that earned. Yep. Michelle, my parents taught me I didn't need to get a degree. I did it anyway. Now I only want to work for myself. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, Max said it's really full on when you consider the depth of this. Can't really conceive of a limit. Oh, look, exactly. And the truth is, to really get what your dreams are, you have to have the ability to not care about what people think or move beyond that, because there's always people and society telling you what to think, like everywhere. You got your doctors telling you, you got the pharmaceutical, you got the government in the newspaper, you've got your friends around you, you've got your family, you've got your kids, you've got your parents. Everyone's there to tell you what to do. And once you start to really make up your own mind and decide what is it that my dreams are, and one thing I would encourage all of you to do is, as you really think about the now, imagine if I'm now my 80-year-old self talking to myself now. Would I really look back at my life and be proud or pleased with where I'm at, or would I wish I'd done things differently? And if the answer is I wish I'd done things differently, then I suggest you move today and start really living the life and doing what you really desire to be. Christine, I ignored everything I was told about health from the start, how I copped the financial imprints, now starting to throw them off. Yeah, look, exactly. The truth is, life is more than money. That's the reality. I don't think there's anyone on their deathbed who ever goes, I wish I'd made more money. I honestly don't think anyone ever has. And if they have, well, they would certainly be in the minority. My father, who's now 82 years of age, openly says to me, he goes, if I had my time differently, I'd take more risks. He said, I would have been less fearful about investment. I would have spent more time with my family and less time kind of caught up in my own worries. So Fiona says, I've chosen to homeschool my son because I don't agree with the education system. Yeah, well, why do you think I homeschool my kids, Fiona? For that exact reason. So, and the good thing is, a lot of people had the belief and said, you can't homeschool your kids because it's too much work. I said, well, I don't do much work with it at all, because I just sat down with them and said, well, guys, this is a choice. Go to school, I said, and be indoctrinated by the system, and you're more than welcome to do it. Or you can basically you can be homeschooled, but you're going to have to take a lot of responsibility and present the curriculum to me and do all the hard work. And 3 of the 4 of them agreed to do it. So only one goes to school, and he does it by choice, but he did do 2 years of homeschooling before he went back to school. Max, as I did a lot of clearing, I came to realize I understood deep truths intuitively. Yeah. No, absolutely. So the point is, you absolutely can do it. So it's good you're getting awareness, because the whole point is not to beat yourself up. It's just to get awareness about what's really going on in your mind. and just realize, well, where it is, you've got to reprogram yourself and allow yourself to change your thinking. And the number of things which I'm now doing in my life was 10 years ago, I would have just said, there's no way in a million years I'd do these things I'm now doing. So the point is, the people that I always love are the people who are always willing to grow. No matter what age you are, no matter what's going on in your life, you're willing to grow and shift. Okay. Yeah, Rochelle, my parents homeschooled me during high school. Yeah, I find that people who've been homeschooled, Rochelle, they seem to be generally freer thinkers. That's one thing I found. And those of you who've met my boys know they're very, very free thinkers. They're very independent. Edward, my 15-year-old, is actually often telling me off or telling the family off at times. And Sammy's laughing because she calls him the thought police because he's always telling her off for her language. So those of you in Albany would have seen Edward in action on that one. So, okay, so manifestation principles. Any more comments before we continue? Okay, so no more thoughts, so let's continue. Okay, so shifts in religion, spirituality, and science. And we've already mentioned this here. One of the things that I felt to share and just refresh on this one is that religion and spirituality is now seen more and more as congruent with science. And it's really important to understand that once upon a time, religion and science were considered to be very much correlated and congruent these days. Back in the past, once upon a time, they were considered to be conflicting. So this is a great thing now. And once you realize this, you realize that you're not basically going on any weird esoteric journey, but in 10 years' time, what we're doing today will be mainstream. Mark my words, 10 to 15 years from now, possibly less, this will be mainstream. It'll be completely mainstream. Like 20 years ago, for example, psychological illness was considered to not actually exist by most doctors. Nowadays, I mean, no doctor would dare to say that now. I mean, it's now become well accepted that mental health is a real, genuine concern and an issue that needs to be addressed. Likewise, the next what I call evolution in medicine or health will be what's called etheric or esoteric medicine, where more and more people will realize there is a morphogenetic or energetic field, which basically does impact and influence your hologram, what you're creating. Even recently, for example, I had a gallbladder. When I had gallbladder stuff going on, I realized a lot of it was coming from morphogenetic patterning. And once I addressed my morphogenetic patterning, I was basically able to prevent what was called a persistent pattern where my gallbladder would be really good, then I would have some soreness. It would be really good, then some soreness. And then once I addressed the morphogenetic patterning, it definitely has been very different since. So this is what we mentioned last week as well, that everything is an energy in a hologram. And really, think of your mind like a radio transmitter. So if you're basically not manifesting what you're looking to manifest with your health or money, knowing it's coming from your thoughts and the frequency that you're on. And basically, someone who's on a low vibrational frequency cannot resonate with something on a high vibrational frequency. So, for example, if you're talking about being financially independent, or let's say having an income of, say, 25 grand a month, and right now you're on, say, 2 grand a month, well, you're going to have to significantly change your frequency and your resonation and what you actually ponder, what you're thinking, and things like that. So the thing is, you can energize and shift yourself all you want in all areas of your life and reprogram yourself and see immediate tangible results in your life. Everything from the amount of tax you pay, the safety of your wealth. And some of those, who know me, for example, I don't even lock the door of my house hardly ever. And I know Sammy took a while to get used to that. But I just don't lock the door of my house often, my car. Because I always say that basically my asset protection or my energy is basically, I use pyramids and energy. Now, of course, when we're at home, Sammy always makes sure the door is locked. But I just don't have in my consciousness the even thought that will happen to me, or that when I go out, that anything will happen. I can remember when I was young, I would be out in the schoolyard. I'd have kids desiring to beat me up. It's like they couldn't get near me because something in me always said they can't touch me. And again, I can thank my mum for programming that into me. Fiona, I haven't locked our doors for about 8 years. Yeah, well, my uncle, they used to leave their keys in the car. They used to leave their doors unlocked at their house, everything. They never ever got robbed or anything. So I think that's partly where I picked up from too. I've also seen people, and I've seen this especially even with taxes. I have a client who for 18 years has never lodged a tax return ever. Makes extremely good money and just never has. Now, admittedly, he's not my client anymore, but this client, I remember saying to him, he said to me one day calmly, well, I don't believe I should be paying it. So he said, why lodge a tax return? And there's just nothing in him that's kind of feels guilty about it, afraid anything will happen to him. He just says, well, I said, well, you know, don't you want to structure yourself properly? He said, no. He said, not really. He said, they can't get to me anyway, and if they did, well, I'll just deal with it at the time. But he said, I can't see it happening, and he said, I don't believe I should be paying it. And I just laughed and go, fair enough. So your belief system has a lot, pretty much influences your whole life. And I can remember, for example, with taxes, like here's one for you, just to kind of challenge some of your assertions. Who believes on this webinar right now, genuinely, that you have to get yourself a business number or ID number for your business? Who believes you have to do that? James does. Yep. Rochelle. Paul, no. Fiona. Correct. Do you know that even under tax legislation, it clearly says having a number is optional. It actually says it's optional. The only thing it does say is, that's right, James, my accountant said to. Exactly. Most people are getting advised by their accountants saying you must have one. But the truth is, if you look at the legislation, you don't have it. No, you don't, Fiona. However, the banks are supposed to take out 48.5% tax from you. If you're an employee, they're supposed to take out 48.5% tax from you. Many people don't, but no, you don't have to have one. And so there's no requirement in the law for you to have one. Yeah, Jason's blown away. Most people are. I always like throwing out these funny little facts about the truth. Here's another one for you. Who believes that the ATO, the Australian Taxation Office, or the IRS is an effective legal entity? If you do, the answer is wrong. It's not. Correct, Robert, it's not. The ATO is actually a registered, it's not even a legal entity. It's a registered business name in Washington. If you actually go onto the SEC site, you will see that the Australian Taxation Office is actually registered as a Washington business. So why on earth is the Australian Taxation Office a Washington, DC business? Well, Sammy goes, you tell me. So obviously it's owned by somebody. Do you know that the Commonwealth of Australia is registered as an American-owned business? Yeah, Arjun, what? Yeah. If you look up the Commonwealth of Australia, it's a corporation that's registered as a Washington, US government-owned business. It is. So in other words, so why is the government actually owned in America? So clearly that's telling you who actually owns Australia. And number one, it's certainly not the people. Number two, it's a big corporation and a big swindle fraud that's basically owned. And now here's the other good fun for you. Can you find out the shareholders of it? The answer is no. They're traced through various shadow companies and shadow holders in tax havens. You'll never find them. So while they're telling everyone to stay away from tax havens, they're rife with tax havens and shadow companies that you can't trace. A friend of mine in 2001 or 2002, they discovered through research that 86% of Australian public companies are owned by people you can't actually find out who they are. I did meet the person who found out who they were, and he got the evidence to find it was a group of bankers and merchants over in Europe, as you can imagine. So the point is, what you believe about the world, most of it isn't actually true. And once you get that, you start to go, okay, most of it's just a big illusion. I remember when I first was told this, I have to say, I thought, you've got to be kidding me, until I actually saw the evidence for myself. So if you actually search, in fact, let's do it right now for a bit of fun. Sometimes I've taken it off, but then it comes back on. So, yep, here we are. Hang on. Yeah, they've kind of taken it off, I think, by the looks of it. Let's have a look. No, here we are. Commonwealth of Australia, registered right here. So there you are, registered at the Securities and Exchange Commission. So there we are, at the US SEC, the Commonwealth of Australia, registered business address in America. Yeah, Christine, thanks for showing that. I've got Sammy and Sammy's mother here going like, looking at absolute astonishing. Christine's angry and shocking. Oh, it's terrible. So there you go. You can see it with your own eyes. I'll freak everyone out. I know. I always do when I say that. It's terrible, isn't it? Yeah. Sammy's like, can't believe it. Yeah. So to give you a bit of an idea about tax system, and I remember the other day, I told my kids I'd teach them about tax. This was about a year or two ago. And they said, so what does tax work? How does it work? I said, well, imagine, I said to William, that you make, let's say that you make $100 a week from your business, okay? And when I come to you and I take 50% of your money and say, well, I'm going to give it to your brothers and everyone else who aren't working because I think that's fair. They said, that doesn't sound very fair. And I said, that's tax. So as you can see, the tax office is an entity or hologram, as is the government. It's a collective belief. You've got to get back to what government actually is. It's really important manifesting to understand that. What we call the government, it's actually who is basically the government comprised of. It's comprised of the people. When you go back to the original constitution, you will see that very clearly. But parliaments were set up to represent their people and electorate. They're now represented by parties that are, of course, owned and controlled by big business interests. But I'll show you what I call the whole, or what's called the chain of creation. So order of creation. Many of you have shown this before, but so there you go. So God, back, let's see if I can make this a little bit easier. So God creates man, woman, which creates government. Now, once you understand this, by the way, you realize that literally you have power over your life. Just out of interest, just for some of you to make your life even a little bit more interesting, I have not voted in an election since 1996. So I've not voted in an election since 1996. Another thing is, as well as not voting in that, I've not done a census since 1996. When they tried to find me, I just used certain language and used certain questions of them. So it's understanding that literally, that government, one thing to remember with government, and here's an important one to contemplate. Are they public servants or public masters? The answer is public servants. So who does a servant serve? They serve someone. Who do they serve? The public. So in other words, when you're dealing with government and things like that, this is another part of manifestation. So I'm showing you this for those of you who desire to get authority over the tax office and over government organizations and realize they have no power over you, is to realize this very fact. But ultimately, government only exists because you believe them to exist and because we've created them as a system. The tax office itself, or the IRS, is an entity or hologram, as is the government. The government is a collective belief or system of people. We've been taught to fear it. It exists as a shadow in our subconscious mind and energy realm. So part of manifesting a new sovereignty, and one thing I've noticed between people who are very wealthy and living their dreams and people who are not, one common factor I've seen is that people who are very, very wealthy and living their dreams, they basically completely got this authority sorted out with government. I remember Kerry Packer, when the tax office went after him, and Kerry Packer just said to them very calmly, he said to them, of course I minimize my taxes. And he said, and the truth is, he said, anyone who doesn't is an idiot. He actually said this at the print media inquiry in 1991, because he said, the truth is, you guys are mismanaging the money so badly, but nobody would ever want to give you extra donations. And realize that it's getting harder and harder to get into this mindset, because more and more in society, the collective consciousness is moving a lot in towards socialism and what's called handout and entitlement mentality, and the government's having a right to take the wealthy's money from them. So realize that more and more you do have these things which are hitting your hologram all the time, and a bit like living in a dirty house, if you're going to do it, you're going to have to keep cleaning yourself out. So I'll show you something here. I don't know, I think most of you would have seen this quote here. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, which by the way is what's happened, is that right now, as many of you now know, our money is all created artificially. Basically, the government can just print money whenever they want and devalue your money. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, the banks and the corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of all their property until their children wake up homeless on the land that their fathers conquered. I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing our armies. So in other words, the point is, part of manifesting as well is having the ability to take power in your consciousness in relation to government, and not being afraid to say, well, I'm not afraid to live my dream and to not let the shadows that exist around me get in my way. Max basically puts that this is a massive red pill. Let's see exactly what he's put. A huge, awesome, big, huge red pill in this. Yeah, absolutely, Max. When you start to get this, you start to change in your thinking. One of the things that I said to someone recently, I just said that whenever I've had issues with governments or with people, anything, the number one thing I've always done is done a manifestation around it and said, you know what? I can remember 8 years ago, I had the Legal Practice Board announce they were doing an audit on my trust account. Now, a week earlier, I discovered, to my horror, that there'd been a very bad mistake made in my trust account. Now, I can truthfully tell you it was absolutely inadvertent. If what had happened was they'd been putting certain monies from accounting clients through it, which I thought was perfectly okay, but I found out it wasn't. So as soon as that happened, I just created a manifestation. Everything was going to be fine. The next day I was speaking to the Legal Practice Board, and they just said to me, oh, okay. They said, and I said to them, yeah, I'm thinking of shutting down my trust account. And they said, oh, look, that's fine. They said, we won't bother about the audit, and they just cancelled the whole audit. And numerous times I've had this happen to me. So understand that a lot of us put our energy into fear, which is the biggest waste of time, absolute waste of time. So changing your belief systems on tax and money, I put two things. One is moving beyond the realms of taxes and into higher contribution and giving back as a sovereign individual, i.e. recognizing the common law responsibility to contribute to the collective. The more that you are giving back to society and to the world as a whole, the more you got to write to minimize your contribution. That's rule number one. Number two, the more money you make, the less tax you pay. That's a belief. Most people live in a belief system that the more money you make, the more tax you pay. So in actual fact, who would love to program themselves that the more money you make, the less tax you pay? Who'd love to have that? Yep. Dasha, Jenny. Well, 5 proofs. In 2016 Sydney Morning Herald, Peter Martin, journalist in Sydney, looked at 56 of the richest income earners in Australia, and guess how many of them actually paid tax? The answer was 2. 54 didn't. So there you go. So the more money you make, and it actually makes logical sense when you think about it, because let's just say you're making $10 million a year income. Are you able to easily spend, say, $200,000 with a tax expert to minimize your tax legally? The answer is yes. If you're making, say, $400,000 a year as a middle-class earner working for someone else, of course you're going to be paying a lot of tax. Then the rich can and will pay for high-level tax advice. That's the second part. C, the rich are more willing to fight and less afraid of government. In other words, they're less afraid. I'll give you an example. In New Jersey, some years ago, the New Jersey came out and said, hey, we've got this great idea in America, the government. They said, we've got a wonderful idea. They said, why don't we increase the taxes on the rich people, so we can have more money and we can give you more handouts and we can help New Jersey people. And everyone goes, yay! And everyone was happy. So what do you think happened? The rich people all left. The richest man in New Jersey, who basically contributed a lot of the tax revenue, and a few others all left straight away. They left New Jersey and they went and moved up to Florida and Wyoming and places like that. This basically had much lower taxes. So New Jersey's tax revenue in 12 months plummeted. So this is what happens. The rich are more afraid, are more willing. Whereas what do most people do when they have things happen they don't like? They just kind of whinge, they get upset, but they put up with it. Whereas the wealthy will fight, they'll engage lawyers, they'll move overseas, they'll do what they have to do. They're used to negotiation and they're used to winning and success. So same with tax audits as well. So clients who get tax audited often have a metaphysical basis. So the thing is, when you realize that everything in your life, you have created it in your life and you have attracted it to yourself, once you realize that, you take responsibility for everything in your life. So I've given you a list of examples here of people who tend to get tax audited and why they're getting it. So I've had both these things. I've been audited a couple of times. The first time was definitely excessive hatred for government. I had a very angry attitude about government. The second time was more about just stretching me to a higher level. But I remember teaching this once at a webinar, and I actually had business owners coming to me. One guy said to me, yeah, he goes, it's incredible, it's so true. He goes, I was exactly like that. I was terrible with my detail, and I was getting messages from my higher self constantly to fix up my book, so I never got round to it. And the audit forced me to fix things up. So all these things, when you start realizing these things, you can shift things really, really fast. So every experience, there's a lesson designed to help us grow, and it's being created or attracted. One thing I learned from a great teacher of the unconscious mind, most people live in what I call multiple layers of unconscious manifestation. And this is the reason why suddenly you're going along in life and sees fine, and out of the blue, you have like a car crash, or you have a sickness, or you have a financial disaster. And it's because of layers building up under your unconscious that you're not dealing with and bringing out into the conscious and addressing, which is why you need to be constantly manifesting and taking control. If you're not taking control of your own manifestation process, then understand that you won't really be in control of what happens in your life. Your unconscious and the mass consciousness will impact it for you. You can't be passive around manifestation, because you will manifest someone else's manifestation, whether it be your own unconscious or something outside of yourself. So here for dealing with tax audits and government, so we will be doing some clearings throughout this course and manifestation around this, and learning how to change your thinking around this and how to clear yourself so you can dissolve the negative frequency and what's attracting this to you. I can remember I used to attract a lot of speeding fines, and when I really cleared myself and shifted my energy hologram, it just stopped happening. So some tips or whatever, very important to keep your books and records organized. It's one of my biggest tips. I find people who don't do that and have very disorganized records inevitably attract some kind of balancing event, whether it be an audit, or it be some kind of or just some kind of event in their life that forces them to organize things. And there's just an example of my letter and what I got. So everything, as we said last week, from negative money experiences and all that kind of stuff. Christine Norby, I'm finding that the giving thanks up front for a great experience and peace is a real new key. Oh, look, I was actually in Thailand, Christine, 18 months ago, and I met a guy who was an expert in teaching the unconscious realm. And one of my clients had some extraordinary results of him. And I went to one of his little work things, and he said that they found that one little exercise he got me doing and got my son William doing was that every day, just literally starting your day and ending your day with 3 things you're grateful for, just finding things you're grateful for and giving thanks in advance for everything, for things basically working. And there's no question, if you did that consistently and start giving thanks for your health in advance and start giving thanks, your unconscious only knows what you're saying and what you're believing. So if you truly believe that you're already on the way to being healed, even if you're in pain, your unconscious mind starts to manifest and move you into that reality. So if, for example, you lose money in investment, and rather than say, oh my gosh, I've had a horrible loss, what have I done wrong, or whatever, you just go, well, it's just part of life. You know, it's like playing Monopoly. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. I'll just make sure the next one's even bigger. And I win by even more. I remember when Donald Trump, years ago, he basically was $1 billion in debt, which he couldn't pay. And he literally had a number of banks chasing after him. And in his book, he wrote, he said, he just basically, he never saw himself as broke or failure. He just saw it as that for now, he basically was temporarily out of funds and temporarily short of cash. And that's what he told the banks. He said, I'm temporarily out of cash. I will get back on track. Just have to be patient with me. And I remember that helped me a lot when I went through my own business failure a number of years ago. That's just basically the attitude I took. But just be patient. I'm just temporarily short of cash. So really important to realize that how you frame things determines ultimately your reality. Everything from speeding fines as well. Even they are to do heavily with the collective consciousness. So, by the way, I'm personally convinced that these governments and these powers that be are quite evil, many of them, because they know about brainwashing, and that's why they're deliberately hitting your mind and brainwashing things into you. So, being free of these programs and imprints is a daily and constantly recurring theme. And you need to realize that these things are constantly coming into you and have been in many cases implanted into you. And the more you basically go into higher realms and higher frequencies, the more you can start to clear these things out of your unconscious. But to understand that most of us have had so much programming, and many of you may remember that Henry Ford, the great Ford motor car guy, who actually discovered about this programming through symbols, and he wrote books on it to expose it. And after getting 3 factories firebombed, he stopped producing the books and putting them in the car. So, in his motor cars. So the point is, many of these guys are very aware about brainwashing and just how you can use symbols and codes and impressions. Why do you think McDonald's spends so much money on that stupid M symbol? But M symbol has got more coding in that one, that when you look at that, than almost all the words they could ever put in an ad. So this is one of the reasons, by the way, why we use codes in our manifestations, and why we use codes to program you and to clear you out. So I had a number of successes with speeding fines, the individual and lawyer, using manifestation principles. I won a jurisdictional case in a courtroom, and I actually was on the internet about this. Christine Evans, is it possible to get Henry Ford's book? Yeah, I've had difficulties finding the original copy, Christine. I've got one copy of it, but I don't think it's actually the original one. But he didn't write it in his own name. He wrote it through a lady called Edith Starr, Lady Queensborough. She wrote it, and he sponsored her to write the book. So I basically won a case in a courtroom, and when I went in there, I created a manifestation and energy that I'd win this. I got numerous WA fines. There was one time, many times I made my car invisible to cameras, where I just energetically created that over it and it went right through them and nothing happened. My best one ever, which I think I actually explained on a webinar, which still to this day blows my mind, but I learnt this from, as Natasha would know, Raymond Grace, and Ed Strachan also used to talk about this. I was pulled over by a cop, and I was on my last points. And if I had got another fine, I would have lost my license. And as the guy was basically said, I'll go and check your record before deciding what I'm going to do about you running this red light, because I ran a red light and didn't realize I'd done it. And I just sat there, and in my mind, I created a manifestation that everything was fine and that I imagined and saw my record completely clean. The cop came back to me and he goes, well, I checked your record and you're completely clean, so I'm going to let you off. Now, I can assure you I had like 4 fines at the time. So that all happened energetically. Raymond Grace tells about how literally hundreds of speeding fines, he just basically made magically disappear from the system where they can't find them anymore. I did this in Victoria, by the way. I got a speeding fine in Victoria years ago, and I did a clearing on it. And I remember the day before it was due, I contacted them, and basically they said, oh, well, there's no evidence of this anymore, so don't worry about it. So this actually happened to me. Max says one time he was pulled over and breath tested after a couple of glasses of champagne. And Max said, I did the same thing, and put yourself under the limit. That's great. No, absolutely. It works very well, Max. So the point is, you can do just about anything what you believe it. So just before I go into giving you, we're going to do a manifestation today, just get practicing, get you used to doing it today. Just a quick discussion about brain states. It's really important to understand about altering your brain state, because once you turn 13, your brain is now functioning in what's called a beta frequency, which means it goes fast, and generally you're thinking all the time in your head. So you're no longer really listening to your unconscious. And now, the only time that you really are is when you're meditating, or, for example, when you have a trauma, or when basically you're watching television, you go into a natural alpha state, which is why, by the way, why they're so big on programming you through doing that. So, but altered states of consciousness are a part of society's evolution pretty much since time immemorial. And ancient Indians were using like plant medicine, psychedelics, and you have what's called like the Quakers, for example, in the 1800s and 1700s. The Quakers were basically doing a lot of these what's called spiritual movements, where they were called the Quakers because they were shaking, because their consciousness was altered so heavily, their body was shaking, and they were kind of in this trance. Hypnosis, like many of the studies on hypnosis, what they're doing is they're taking you into a really deep theta state of mind. And in that state, they consciously reprogram you. So there's very common ways. Psychedelic drugs is very common, or one way. And for example, in the book Changing Fire, I think it's called, they talk about how every year at Silicon Valley, at certain conferences, in the Burning Man conference, many of the world's richest billionaires meet and do psychedelic sessions together, and they get into an altered state so they can get downloads for the year. And it's been proven, for example, that things like ayahuasca, MDMA, medicinal cannabis, and medicinal marijuana can actually heal things like PTSD, and certainly can bring you into a much deeper state of consciousness. So that's one way of doing it. Another way is what's called neurofeedback that was done in the military. So, for example, if you were going to be a sniper and do shooting, they had to get you into a deeper brain state. So they'd use neurofeedback, where they taught you through brain training apparatus, and I've done lots of neurofeedback myself. They train you to quieten your brain through this deep state work. Meditation is another way, which I do plenty of that one. Meditation and deep breathing. So even now on this webinar, by listening to this stuff and by me teaching this stuff, many of you by now would already be in an alpha state just because you're listening to me and you're really kind of passive. So this is how you're able to get it. That's why some of the most powerful healings happen. And those of you who really can go into a deep brain state many of you start falling half asleep during our clearings. Like who, for example, notices whenever we do a manifestational clearing, you tend to start going into a half sleep state. Who notices that out of interest? Yeah, Robert, yep. Natasha, Nolene, Christine. Yeah, so those of you it happens to, that's when you know that it's happening really fast. And it still happens in the alpha, but in a theta, it really happens. This happened to me 3 days ago. William and I were doing clearings together. And I literally went into a half sleep state and I wasn't hardly with it. And I came out of it and all I knew was I woke up the next day and I just felt absolutely amazing. So, so for those of you who ever desire to do a little bit more of this, as well as these courses, neurofeedback is certainly a great way to start, is one very good way to learn to quieten your brain. And for those of you who've got anxiety and overactive brains, neurofeedback, and I stress when I say this, are properly administered psychedelic drugs, which means in a proper situation like that, these can bring you into a very deep state of mind, and for manifestation. So here's the basic brain frequencies for you. So 14 hertz plus is what's called what most people are in once they go past 13. Alpha state, ages 7 to 12. The quiet daydreaming state when you're basically half asleep, half awake in a meditation, much less in the mass mind than you are in the beta. The theta, now notice what I said was 7 hertz. One of Australia's most leading brain research, brain neurofeedback specialists, who some of you have met, John Thompson, and who Alex, of course, and Christine Evans and a few of you have heard about him, and I know a few of you were at his workshop, which we did a little while ago. But John Thompson says that the 7 hertz is what's called the aha moment. And when he's doing brain training on people, there's one time when I was having some profound shifts, and he said, yeah, you kept going into a 7 hertz. The other one is what's called a 4 to 6 hertz. And that's the portal between this realm and the next realm, where deep healing and reprogramming happens when you let go and higher self heals you. You connect to the universal mind. And then when you're in a sleep state, you're basically in that dreamy, where you're really in that other dimension. Once you're in a sleep state, you're really in that what's called unconscious realm. So that's the basic brain state. So ideally, at the very least, in the manifestations, we move you into an 8 to 14 hertz. But some of you who start falling asleep would move into a 7 hertz or 4 to 6. So Gerald O'Donnell, a great trainer of brain frequency, says, think of brain states like a building. Second floor is where the activity happens, the beta. The first floor, alpha, is where the programs and beliefs are stored. The ground floor, theta, this is beyond the alpha in your beliefs and starting to connect with the universal mind. And so, in other words, if you're on the second floor, you can't change the programs. You have to at least go to alpha. When you go to theta, you can go beyond the alpha and you can actually install deeper programs and newer beliefs that supersede the first floor. And then the basement is the universal mind. So one of the things, for example, you can do, and some of you know about this, is where you can use this to go into a deep state and even read the unconscious mind around markets, around cryptocurrency values, around sports betting games, around trading. And Nolene saw that with me, for example, where we actually, I did a remote view for her and was able to then turn around and tell her what was going to happen on the market later on. So there's a lot you can do once you really start to understand, and it becomes very exciting and actually quite addictive once you realize this stuff and how much this can change your life. Nolene, and you're spot on. Yeah, no, look, I found there's a very interesting, I'll just quickly show you something which just for a little bit of fun, just to show you this. I'll show you something here just for a bit of interest for you, a bit of fun. So this was a 13-year experiment using remote viewing, which was really about tapping into the unconscious realm and using protocols. So 5,677 trades were done using this. They found that 52.65% were correct. But what they noticed, now that doesn't sound all that exciting, but when they actually, what they found was that as the readings were more accurate and more clear, they found the success rate got above 70% and as high as 78%. They found that even of the ones, including all the ones that weren't clear, so keep in mind they weren't just going with the clear ones, they were using all the readings. They found even then 60% of the trades were profitable using a pure 50-50 trade. So in other words, basically able to access the unconscious, they were getting 60% accuracy in doing this without even using any analysis or technical analysis. Shazia Sabani, who I do a lot of this kind of work with, she gets between 80 and 95% accuracy on her remote viewing on this kind of stuff. So it's quite interesting when you read this paper, and they go through the silver market and using remote viewing, they go through the whole process, how they do it, and give the whole protocol. It's a very interesting reading. So who's excited at the moment? Who's kind of getting a little bit turned on by all this? Sammy says she is. Jason's very excited. Yeah. Nolene, yes. Max and Miss Effort. Yeah, it's good, isn't it, Max? It's awesome stuff. Yeah, so in terms of manifestation, just some principles. Now, we're going to be teaching a lot more on this, so I'm going to move through this quite quickly, but I've learned one thing with this, that I need to repeat this a lot. So that's why I'm just starting to throw it in now and get started on this one, because really you need to hear something at least 4 times to basically sink in. So for those of you who feel it's rushed, relax, it will be covered in a lot more depth. So a clear intention and taking action are critical. Equally critical is letting go and letting God, and knowing that basically we're all different in how we're experiencing an outcome. So patience is the other one. So divine right timing, sometimes you manifest instantly, sometimes it takes time, and you must let go and detach from the outcome. The third one is a blockage. So in other words, clearing the blockages, because sometimes you can do a manifestation, but if you've got a really big blockage around it, it's not going to happen. Taking on the golden nuggets of wisdom which arise. For example, if we're doing a manifestation about transforming our finances, we often need to take the nuggets of wisdom as to the past lessons and the mistakes that we've made. And here's where many manifestation teachings fail, like The Secret and things like that. Without taking action, nothing really manifests. There's an old saying which I love, but basically you can't steer a stationary car. But you can, if a car's going in the wrong direction, you can turn it around and drive the right way. You're better off to start something today and be off track than do nothing. That's the basic rule. You're better off to trade and actually get in there and do a real account and lose some money than basically be trading and making millions on paper or in demo. That's, for example, that's the basics of manifestation. You're better off to lose $200 in real money by giving it a go than make $1 million in demo. So without action, nothing manifests out of the unconscious realms into the 3D. So a clear intention and taking action are critical. Equally critical is letting go and letting God, and knowing we're all different in how we experience an outcome. So it's really important to get that. So without faith, nothing happens. And I've shared that before from the scriptures, and I love this, what Jesus says. He says that, let me just find. So something like that. So I'm just going to open that one up. And then the other one, so here we are. Whoever shall say to this mountain, be removed and be cast into the sea, and shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe that those things which he says shall come to pass, he shall have whatever he said. Therefore, whatever things you desire when you pray, believe that you receive them, and you shall have them. And that's the secret. Whatever things you desire, believe that you receive them, and you shall have them. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. So look at that. In other words, going around telling people you're broke is not faith. That's just telling the fact. Telling people that you're already moving into abundance and things are starting to work, and that, yeah, that's faith, if you truly believe it. And one little thing, I had an interesting call with someone today, which was a really good call because a very good question. Like this person said to me, they said, you know, I keep saying that I'm abundant and money flows to me. Why? But yet it just seems to get worse. And what I explained to them was, I said, well, the thing is, if you say something and you don't actually believe in it, if it actually can make it worse. Sometimes you have to find a statement you can believe. So, for example, like when I had these pains in my joints, walking around saying I am now in perfect health wasn't basically feel congruent. But what I was able to say and mean it was say, I know I'm already getting better and better, and my health is moving into perfect health every day. So that felt I could say that. So, for example, you might say, yeah, financially I'm temporarily out of funds, but things are moving better. Or you might just even leave out the first part and say, yeah, well, things in my finances are starting to improve. I can feel the shift happening in me already. And the truth is, if you're starting to feel positive about it and confident and know it's working out, you're already more wealthy than you were before. But going around saying, I know things are already improving, and even being joyful for the little things when they come your way and acknowledging them, that's really important too, because no one likes an ungrateful whinger. So someone who's walking, I mean, I'm sure all of you can't stand whingers, can you? Like when you're around someone who whinges and carries on about how bad life is, you just want to get rid of them. So how much more do you think Source or God or the universe is? They're just kind of like, oh gosh, you know, when you're sitting there whinging about your finances or about your health, they're just like, oh God, talk to the hand. You know, it's like Source just basically wants to block you out and ignore you. And so through faith and patience, inherit the promises. So I'll say that again. Don't be lazy, but be followers of them who through faith and patience, in other words, faith and taking action. So there you go. So I'm going to get you now to draft up. Some of you are already well on the way to doing this and have done some, but just draft out 1, 2, or 3 things that you like to manifest, and keep it really simple. I mean, don't write some long-winded thing like, you know, I manifest $8 million in all kinds, in all my trading programs and all this, and or whatever else. Just keep it simple, like $10,000 a month income by 31st of March, or a successful trading where I am generating this, or just keeping it without even saying trading, where I'm generating $15,000 a month with grace and ease, doing what I'm loved. You know, keep it really simple what you do, because your unconscious mind, something that's simple, and number 2, you've got to feel what you're saying. The rule is, if you're not feeling what you're saying, it won't work, because your unconscious ultimately goes by feeling over what you logically say. So the feeling is ultimately what determines what manifests. That's why many people are manifesting their worst fears, because their fears generally have greater energy than their faith. So really creating a manifestation around something that you can feel. Like, I'll give you an example. Let's just say that I gave a manifestation for myself, and I remember once doing this ages ago. You know, I manifest $100,000 a month in running a tax accounting business where I'm helping people set up structures or whatever else. And I must admit, it didn't exactly inspire me. Yeah, I remember putting down manifesting $100,000 a month, doing webinar, $100,000 a month with grace and ease, doing what I love in helping, in giving, in spiritual teaching or something like that. That's a lot more inspiring for me, in that I have all my financial needs abundantly met, and I'm now a spiritual teacher and doing my primary work. And, or I'm now making whatever money I desire to make, and I'm now a master trader. I remember with trading, when I did my manifestations around there, I didn't say I was a master trader. I did it first, but didn't feel congruent. So I said, I am rapidly developing into a master trader. So Nolene and Fiona, that might be you. I'm quickly developing into a master trader. I love this process and I enjoy the process of learning in my lessons. I am quickly generating abundant, all abundant provision or something like that. So I'm quickly generating into a master trader with all my needs abundantly met, something like that. So here's the basic 5 steps we'll follow today, just to give you a start and what generally you follow. Number 1, create the manifestation and formulate it clearly. Number 2, we're going to take you into a deep brain state to command it. Number 3, we're going to clear the blockages. Number 4, then get a sense and take some action. In other words, you must do something about it. Getting a manifestation and then feeling all good about it doesn't actually do anything. You need to actually take immediate action on it. And when I say immediate, fast. It's even something simple. If it's about trading, do something. Like if you haven't traded live before, just start trading live. If that's what it's about. If it's about manifesting an income, start looking for opportunities. I can remember years ago when my business didn't work out, and my first time round, and I knew that I didn't want to have another job. At the same time, I needed to get some income. So what I did was I created a manifestation around doing something which I really love doing, where I have full control over my income in producing results. And I end up manifesting a job. And so the first thing I did, though, was even though I didn't want a job, I started looking in the actual job places, recruitment, and talking to them and asking them if there are any contracting positions available. So I moved based on where I could move. And that's what ended up happening. And then although nothing happened from there, I had some friends over for dinner one day. Something opened up. Before I knew it, I was sitting in front of this law firm, and I had this amazing position where I was working minimal hours and making like much more money than I ever made before, with freedom of hours and freedom of time. And that gave me the catalyst to start my own work. And then let go. So once you do it and take action, you then just let go, be patient, and allow it to transpire. And watch for the clues. Okay, so create your intention. And here's a couple of examples here. And today, let's just do one. Don't do 3 or 4. If you do, that's fine. But ideally, just do one or have one ready, okay? One you can put all your attentions into. So that's an example of trading. That's one way you can do it. Another one, $20,000 a month. I can remember when I first started webinars years ago, and I set an amount per month in my in my webinars. So by this particular date, but I manifest X amount per month in my webinars. I can remember once for a competition that I was involved in, I did a manifestation to make $100,000 in webinar, and I knew I had to make it in record time. So I created the manifestation. Now, as a rule, I would do one webinar a fortnight. As soon as I did the manifestation and I did the clearing of blockages, I just got this instant sense I had to do 4 webinars in the next 2 weeks. It just came to me, and I even got the 4 titles. So I did it, and I worked my ass off, did 4 webinars, and I think I made 132,000 or 120,000 in about 2 or 3 weeks just by doing that. And I went absolutely all out. But the point was I took action and listened to my intuition. And what was interesting was if I hadn't done that, the 2 webinars I would have done that I thought would work wouldn't have made me the money. The webinar that made nearly all the money was the last one I expected to make the money. It was one I just did as an afterthought just to see how it went. And this was the one where I made most of the money from. Another one for healing. It is commanded by the laws of the golden liquid realms and the chemical powers. I manifest complete healing and perfect wholeness in my body at all levels right now. So that's a great one for you to use and take a photo with your phone right now if you're wishing to do something around your health right now. Okay, so, and then what I'm going to do is make the command with you, okay? So what I'm going to get you to do is I'm going to give you 2 minutes. I'm going to put it on mute, give you 2 minutes to write this out and be ready. Then I'm going to come back and start the process and do the manifestation with you. And if you've got a question, just put it in the text. Okay, so I hope everyone's all ready to go. Well, yes, the audio disappeared because, as I mentioned, I was going to go for 2 minutes. So, Nolene, can I do a manifestation every day on a different project? Do the manifestation, and you can just do different little ones, Nolene. You'll learn more over the next probably 8 weeks or so as we do this. Just the more you practice, you'll get a bit of an idea. So you'll generally know once you've done a manifestation, you know what it's done. Sometimes what I do is I do it at another level, but generally once you've done the manifestation, it's done. And then you can just do little aspects of it as you go along. So I do manifestations overall, like for a year, then I do them for a week and even for a day and things like that. Okay, so what I'm going to get you to do now is just start to get everyone to breathe through your nose for 4 counts. Then you hold for 4 counts. And then you breathe out through the mouth for 8 counts. So breathe in through the nose for 4. And hold. And out through the nose, through the mouth for 8. And just breathe in for 4 through the nose. And hold. And out for 8 through the mouth. And as you continue to breathe, you'll just start to notice as you're following that pattern that you're going into a much more deeper state. And right now, we just give thanks to all higher vibrational energies aligned with the order of Melchizedek, with the order of Christ, and with the order of Enoch, and with the order of the archangels and the 5 archangels. This way, we're bringing in higher vibrational energies. Some of you will be feeling a strong presence or connection right now with higher realms and with masters. And just start to give thanks in your heart that the thing that you've given to your manifestation has already happened. Just give thanks that you know that your prayer has already been answered. It is commanded by the laws of the golden liquid realms and the chemical powers, and by the power of Christ, that the Tribeca code is used to manifest what each and every person here has put in place now. Aham Brahmasmi, Elijah Tef, Om Kriya Babaji Nama Om, I am this I am. And just receive the activation. And now what you can do is just know that by your intention, that your manifestation is programmed into this Tribeca code, and you can imagine it right in the center. And as you breathe out, just send the Tribeca code, just breathe it into your 3rd eye. So it enters your forehead. Just imagine it being right in your forehead, containing your manifestation. And as you breathe out, breathe it down by your intention to the center of the earth. And as you breathe in, breathe it all the way up so it's 36 inches above your head, and just see it there. And if you can't literally see it there, see it by intention. And hold it there. And as you breathe out, breathe into your heart chakra. And just see it there. And as you see the 3 circles, the Tribeca code, just keep seeing them until you see them observe and roll into one, so there's only one circle. Okay, I can feel it's happened now for people. And as you breathe in and as you breathe out, breathe it out to 6 inches below your feet. Aham Brahmasmi ta Asia intadoi. It is done. And now what we're going to do is just clear the blockages around that manifestation. So those of you who feel, you can feel into your left hand, and if you've got blockages, you'll be feeling a tingling. And most of you, I can feel there's some pretty strong blockages. It is commanded by the laws of the golden liquid realms and the chemical powers and the Christ consciousness that the Tribeca code is used to clear all blockages, programming, imprinting, discarnates, or anything of that kind in the way of this manifestation on all levels and all dimensions now. Clearing out all EDS programming, activating all EDS, all fracturing, and clearing it all now. And just imagine a pink light, like really gorgeous pink light, just coming right through your crown chakra, through the top of your head, and filling your whole energy field. It is commanded that each person be upgraded with new soul programming, new frequency, DNA upgrade, and higher level frequency integration for the accomplishment of this manifestation now. And just imagine golden liquid light coming through you as I say that. I feel there's some very deep integration happening with a lot of people. This is actually quite a deep one today, quite strong. So for those of you who just are still feeling it, just keep receiving it, keep allowing it to integrate into you. And as it starts to integrate and you feel ready, just slowly start to open your eyes and take a sip of water if you can as well. But don't rush the process, just come out when you're ready. And as you're ready, just type in the text chat with your right hand just what you experienced and what happened for you. I sense though for some of you it's still happening. It's happening very, very strongly, this one. James says, now have a slight headache and the tears are flowing. Yeah. Some people carrying some pretty heavy energies there. Christine, I really felt that pink light coming with a thought or shadow, and then it was easy to imagine the golden light. Jason, my eyes are burning with tears. Yeah, when you start getting that kind of energy and when masters start connecting with you, it's pretty wonderful, isn't it? Robin, buzzing in my crown. Yeah, I can sense at least 2, possibly 3 of you of actually feeling the direct presence of masters with you right now. Because I was feeling a couple of them here. Big, overwhelming sense of calm. Yeah. That's what happens when you start to connect with source, isn't it? You start to feel that deep sense of that oneness and with the whole source. Steve had to flick the energy of my fingers on my left hand. Yeah. Max, very intense crying without tears, intense clearing, still feeling things happen. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, sometimes this can go on for quite a while, this. Nolan, left hand totally heavy, couldn't move it, the rest of my body was twitching. Yeah, when you've got a heavy left hand, it normally means you've got heavy energy and even possibly discarnates clearing out of you, Nolan. Fiona feels very calm. Presence of people and had a pressure pass through my nose of all places, yeah. Robert, eyes and nose watering. Michelle, eyes watery, peace tingling down my back. The main thing now is to write down or just ponder, have every one of you got a sense immediately of the action you need to take or some action item? Because usually you would get something come to you or just a little impression. Christine Evans felt expanded. Gold energy kept coming and coming. Yeah. Mitchell, really relaxed, little shock down my body. Yeah, once you start doing this enough too, you will actually find it becomes normal for you. You start to get to a point where your ability to tap into these realms and just clear yourself at will becomes very, very straightforward. And you start to be able to manifest pretty much what you desire at will. Natasha just floored by it, yeah. Yeah, you're having some pretty profound stuff, Natasha, these days, aren't you? She's really been. Okay, so main thing now is action, to write down what you get from that. So as I mentioned here, to get results, manifesting in the 3D and taking action. So really important that after this session, that if you haven't got anything just yet, just know that you'll get something come to you, and when you go to sleep tonight, just know that you're going to wake up with what you need to get done. But it's critical that you take some kind of action or make some kind of commitment. If you're doing a manifestation around clearing a debt, just do something about it, like even if it's simple as actually going and looking at what it is or talking to the person concerned. Max, starting to feel calming now and a sense of peace. Yep. You generally find after something like this, it takes anything from 24 hours to 3 days to really integrate it fully. But the main thing is that for those of you who are getting something to do, the faster you can take or have some action or know what you to do, the better. So is anyone getting something now, like you already got something which you know you need to do? Yep, Nolene, fantastic. Max, yep, excellent. So next required action. And then the other one I've got here is letting go and let God. And that's a really important one. So take some action, and then once you've done it, you just get on with your life and you know it's done. And many of you know that when you strive and anxiously try and make something happen, it seems to go further away from you. And whereas when you just let go and you often don't think about something, it just comes out of nowhere. So this is one of the most important parts, is once you take the action, you just get on with things, but you let go of it and just know it's going to happen. So before we end tonight, any questions? Yeah, if it's meant to be, your head spins. Yeah. The fact is, if you get into a state where you really are at peace, all of you would know anyway. It's like, I always like to think of manifestation like finding a partner in life. It's like, and I've mentioned this metaphor many times before, but it's so apt when it comes to manifestation. If you're looking for a partner, the fastest way to chase someone away from you is become needy, desperate, and anxious and trying to make it happen. And many of you who are women know what it's like having a needy man anxiously trying to grasp for you. You just want to run a mile. And men, you know what it's like when you have a woman doing that to you. Whereas when you're with someone who's just calm, who's at peace, and who's detached as to whatever happens, you tend to be more drawn to that person. And manifestation works very, very similar to that. The more you can just let go of something and be at peace about it, the more likely it is to actually happen for you. Now, that's not to say you become passive, but at the same time, once you create the intention, once you take all your action, once you do all you can do in a situation, then you just got to let go. Jason, that was an amazing session. Thank you. So grateful. Oh, look, my pleasure, Jason. I get excited and very happy when I see people get results and get each week the testimonies and changes in people's lives. It makes me feel really happy. Robert, is there any books how to word your manifestations correctly? The best thing, Robert, is just to keep doing the course. This is why it's a 10-week one, because it's a process. And the only book which I really recommend just keep it simple, keep doing this course, just listen to the webinar 2 or 3 times in the recording, and if you need to. And what I'm going to do right now for you all, I'll just give you all the link in the text chat so you can access the recording straight away. I'm just going to do that for you now. So let me just take the screen off for a second. And I'm just going to get it for you. Oh, yep, here it is. Okay, so here it is. We're going to be having the membership site fixed up over the next little while, but just for now, you can use this one. So this little link here. So this can give you access, and you can see it here. I'll just click on the link now so you can see it. Oh, hang on, Sammy. It's giving a login thing. Yep. Hang on, Sammy's going to give us the link. If not, we'll email something afterwards if we have an issue here. But yeah, thanks everyone. It's been really great. Yeah, but people can't plug that in. Let me just have a look here, see what happens here. Actually, I think this works. I think I've solved it. Yeah, I've got it. I've got it, everyone. So here's the correct one. So this is the one. So you can see it here. So for now, just use this link, and this will enable you. So that's last week's one there, for those of you who haven't seen it. So listen to that. The only book I would recommend for you, if you're really keen to get a book, an audio book, and something else, like you're one of these insane people who just want to go all out, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. You can buy it on audiobooks, or you can buy it online. But this is the only book I'd recommend for now. It's a really good adjunct to what I do, but not, yeah, Nolan's an awesome book. It is. It's the best book in that area. You saw it, didn't you, Sammy? Yeah, Sammy loves it. Yeah, brilliant book. Okay, everyone. Well, thanks a lot, and I look forward to seeing you next week. And for those of you who are on for Thursday, I'll see you on Thursday.